So hello, welcome back again. This is a video I've been wanting to make for a few months, but I couldn't because first this L bracket had to be built. Before we start is a first look. I only got the unit about an hour ago. So first up, thanks to Chen and Tracy at smallrig for talking to me and letting me co-design this part. Or being at least involved in it. And so when I'm talking, and if you know me, I will be talking for quite a while. First thing I want to make sure is that if I say we, I mean not that I really designed it, because they did most of the work, but in discussions I might say we instead of them. So let's get going. So let's first talk a little bit why this was made and what problems we are trying to solve. Now I'll make a second video because I just got this unit an hour ago, and this is a pre-production unit that they sent me. So the final version is now in production, and already a few hundred I think have been sold. I'm quite happy to report that it's doing everything that I expected it was supposed to do, so I don't have to feel guilty about telling people to get this L bracket on pre-order, because it was quite a good deal. It's still a very good deal, yeah, anyway, let's get going. So the whole story starts with the a7riii and the a9. So there is something called, we have called, I guess online, the Pinkie problem, right? So these cameras are small, and that's nice, because if you put small lenses on there, it works perfectly, and I don't want Sony to make them bigger, ever. I think it's totally fine. They could make them maybe 4 millimeters wider to get a little bit more room with some of the lenses, but I don't want them to make bigger and bigger bodies, because I think some of the problems can be solved by third-party products. Now the first product that we saw was actually this one from Sony itself. It's I've been calling it the Pinkie Grip. You sort of attach it to the bottom, and then it's, as you can see, I won't put it on, but you can see that it extends the body in a way that makes it much more comfortable to hold for people with bigger hands on bigger lenses, right? So based on that, I've been fiddling around with L bracket, a really nice one. I've been using was about 8 or 9 millimeters thick, so it kind of started solving this Pinkie problem, but it really didn't completely. The second problem that I have with if you're using big lenses is the way, and I can't show you because of the way that I'm sitting now, but the way that this hand sort of works. So naturally you kind of want to hold it, if you hold it against your breast, right, to get a stable position, you kind of want over here also a little bit of more something to touch, so that you, because if you do it like this, you kind of get a cramped feeling, because a much more natural way is this. And of course the Pinkie thing. So what was wrong with this one? Well, basically it worked perfectly. The first time I put it on, you feel like, this feels much nicer. The camera becomes much more balanced with lenses like this, which I put on. So this is the G Master 16-35, and I put it on because there are quite a few lenses in the Sony lineup which are similar in size. Right, if you think about the popular 24-105, the 90mm macro, some of the primes, they are kind of the same sort of shape and size, and it really feels unbalanced. Again, I don't want Sony to make bigger bodies, but there is a room for third-party products. So when you put on this one, it's quite obvious that it becomes much more naturally feeling. But the problem with this one is that it doesn't allow you to put an Arca Plate on there. And it does, and it also becomes kind of like crooked, standing like this. So although I think the idea was perfect, the execution was not. So I ended up thinking about L bracket, and then because I already was using several products from smallrig, I contacted smallrig, and I was not alone, quite a few people did. Could you make an L bracket for us which kind of uses the same sort of ideas? So I would almost argue, although this is a fine L bracket, there are more good quality L brackets online. In this video or later videos I will show you more details that we put in, because well, once you have the option to help in the design, You can put in some of your own ideas more. So I think there are some pluses on this one compared to the ones that you can get from other brands, and also maybe some negatives. But in general, the biggest change that I wanted is that I wanted the same thickness of the one from Sony. And as you can see, it's even, depending on where you put it, it's exactly the same thickness as the Sony Pinkie, what we have been calling the Pinkie Grip. So that means that once you put it on, it kind of solves the same problem, that your pinky is landing correctly, with the extra benefit of all the other features that an L bracket brings, and also that on this area it gives me the extra, yeah, let's say, contact point I was talking about. So sorry for the long introduction, but let's go for a walk around the product itself. So it comes in basically 3 parts, which you can take out. So the first one is the base itself. Then you have the L part, which, like most of the other brands, you can take off. But there's something special here. There are two screws. You can actually take this one off, and the slide mechanism, which is hidden in here, can actually be separated, and that might be for future other products, or even to take this one off and just use the L bracket part, and then you don't leave a weird hole over here. Probably in the next video I will take it off when I'm talking more about the video features, and show you that. So let's first do a walk around the thing itself. So let's start on this side. You can see, and I will talk about the different features. So this is basically shaped for your hand, right? So two things you already see. There's a slit here, and the slit is to put in your strap if you want to. I'm using Peak Design straps, which I'll talk about a little bit more. And there's a little sort of part taken out here to make sure that if you put it flat, that your strap doesn't, or your Peak Design anchor doesn't scratch up, and it's in a safe position. Now the other thing to talk about with this part is that smallrig didn't go for removing the battery door and placing it on the case itself. There are other products, and I think they are fine, which do that. We didn't want to, because we wanted to keep the seal for the water protection in place, and we also wanted to have the option to later on maybe add a little bit more, let's say, sealing. So we didn't want to fool around with the seal which was already on the camera. Without talking about the quality of that sealing, that's a whole other discussion. But that does mean that this hole has to be big enough to open the battery door and still get the battery out. So as a consequence, there's a little bit part here that sticks out. And once I put it on, I will showcase it. That's one thing that I was worried about a little bit, and they actually redesigned this 2 or 3 times to make sure that it's the best compromise that you can, at least they can have, with still being able to remove the battery, but having something that doesn't feel too weird. Although if you look at a picture, you might think it looks a little bit weird. I will try to convince you that it's actually fine, and it has some plus sides. So let's continue. So here, of course, you see the Arca Plate. I will showcase it later on also how it works, but it's just an Arca sort of plate for the bottom. There's 2 holes here. If you go online, you can see that we designed it so that you can put a mount on here. So for example, you can put a support here for the Metabones converter. So one thing which I think is different from in this L bracket compared to some of the others, that is more, I could say you could already make the argument a little bit more to aim to hybrid shooters, or even, let's say, if you want to do some videos. So there's already some features in there that you won't see on other L brackets, which are more aimed for people who are doing photos, but are also doing some video work. So you will see that there are some small hints, and one of them is this support that you, for example, can put lens supports on there, and maybe even in the future some other things, depending. If you look in the store from smallrig, you will see that there are many parts that you can possibly fit in these holes. The way it was designed is that if once the lens is on, you hardly see them normally, so it's not really a design problem, or in looks anyway. So let's continue. So on this side you see that the L bracket part is put on. This doesn't continue completely. The reason why that's done, that means that you can quite easily slide it into your Arca plate and slide it out again using the lock mechanism. So that's why that is done like this. So, and on the front side it looks quite yeah, clean, right? So you have the Arca plate here. This is all black. We could not, or they could not really make it fit 100%. So what I did, and I think that's a very good design choice. The reason they didn't want to, there is like an edge here to make sure that the camera is solidly once it's in there. But they didn't want to make a standing sort of ridge here, because then water could theoretically sort of go in and stay there and then get into the body at some point. Especially with salt water, that might not be a good idea. So this is kind of open in design, and because this is open in design, you might want to let's say emphasize that in this case by making this bevel. It makes it easier to open the LCD door later on, but it also the LCD flap, but it also means that you have an extra sort of design yeah, focus, that you don't notice as much that there's a little bit of space in between. So let's continue. Well, we already did the other side. From the L part, of course, you can see that the Arca plate works the same here. You can shift it out like this and lock it up here. So the bottom part, you'll see the first interesting part is that they hide an Allen wrench here. There's three magnets, three small magnets, and you see that it fits there, right? And it's quite, you can see that it won't fall off. Let's see if it really don't lose it. But most people have many of these Allen wrenches, so if you lose it at some point, let's see how it works, right? So the bottom part, you have this Allen wrench which you can take out with your finger. Then you have the screw to be able to put out the slide part. You have your screw that puts it to the camera, and your new screw for your, if you still want to use a different Arca plate or Manfrotto plate. Then this hole will be more clear later. There's a hole here that you can use to hide your Peak Design anchor, or even another strip. It's a little bit recessed. So again, that if you hide it, so let me use my finger. So if you hide it, this thing still is totally flat on the surface, right? So, and here again you see this little flap that I was talking about. Again, that was a compromise in design, but as a result, you can still have the battery door on there, and I will show how that will work later on. Then there are a few slides here, which also and holes also which are needed to make sure. Sorry. A few slides here, which are needed to be able to have your safety lock for your Arca plate on, and I will also show that later. So I think from a visual point, this is about it. So let's take the tool out and put it on the camera. This is the second time I'm putting it on. So let's see how far we are in the video. We already are 15 minutes in, so I guess sorry for the teaser, that only now you get to see how it sort of looks. But if you pre-order this, now for me, I have to make one thing careful, is that I put the, let me put it into view, that I put the other Peak Design sort of in this hole, because I found that it's working better. Then I will screw it on. Won't do it too tight, and I think there's only one way that it automatically fits. Again, this is the second time. Yeah, there's basically no, as far as I can see, no way to do this wrong. So let's look at it. So first let me showcase it a little bit like this. And one thing from the design, I figured this would be quite shiny. It's actually a nice sort of matte metal. So I think it looks quite nice. And you can see what I meant with this beveled sort of design. It's still easy to get the door open, no problem at all. And you can see that this line sort of, I think, helps in the overall look of it. So let me try to rotate the camera. You can see how it sort of fits. And let me also show this, let's say, trouble area. If I can showcase that, you can see that there's a little bit of an edge here, which I will get back into in a second. And let's continue. So now for later on, this 15 minutes point will be an important point, because there I will showcase it on the camera. So you can see, let's first talk about the real starting problem, right? So this was the starting problem. You can see it totally now hits the pinky perfectly for me. Of course, if I'm holding it, I'm shifting it a little bit down, because you see quite a few people sort of showcasing the lens problem like this, right? Well, actually you're not holding it like this. Everybody's holding it like this, right? This makes more sense. So that's why once you're really holding it yourself, you kind of feel that your fingers go to the correct position. But you can see that I now have a solid place to put my two fingers between the top sort of ridge that Sony made and the bottom one. And when talking about this ridge, you can see what the compromise is. Yes, your finger will hit this ridge thingy here, but this is actually a plus. So you can't put your third finger there, at least I can't. I can't put it into that area. I have to put it on this part, which makes sense. But the good news about this ridge is actually when you're walking, it's much more stable. So what I mean with that, there's no, you kind of now, let me turn it like this. Your finger is kind of now, or your hand is kind of supported one way by this little ridge and the other one with the one over there. That means that if you're holding it like this and you're walking around, it actually feels more stable than some of the other L brackets I've used, simply because you feel this finger feels that you're holding the camera in the correct position. I know this might sound weird, but at least that's my conclusion, and that's our excuse for doing it this way. So yes, it was a compromise because of the battery, but it also, I think, it works out perfectly, since you sort of, when you're walking, you kind of feel that you feel the ridge, which is handy because you know that you're solidly grabbing the camera. So what else can I show in this case? I didn't lock it. Yeah, I did lock it correctly. So let me show the battery, right? It's also not an unimportant part. As you can see, no problem putting the battery in and getting it out. So this part, you can see that it's now quite easy. It still allows for this to be attached. It makes a little bit of noise for people here, but what I will do is I'll put a little bit of Velcro there, and then I can stick it on the bottom. I'll show it in another video. I can stick it over there and it will sort of stay there. So I'm pretty happy with how that worked out. You can also see some support holes here, and that's to be able to attach more stuff here on the other side for video works. You can see that this one is now quite protected, so that's also nice. And going back to the grip, you can see that the Pinkie problem is solved, but also, and I think people are missing that issue quite a lot, is that this feels more stable. Right, so if you're holding it, it's kind of leaning into your palm if you have somewhat bigger hands than me. So that's also yeah, a good thing. The same sort of here, right? So if we compare it with the before video, you can see that if I now put my hand in a natural position on the lens, and of course your hand would be more like this, right? If you're holding it up, right? You can see that the palm is now sort of hitting the cage. And that means that it's much more stable if you're holding it like this, just to lock down the camera. So again, that didn't of course work with the Pinkie Grip because it doesn't do anything for that. But in this case it also helps over there. And of course it's now totally flat because of the Peak Design plug is hidden, and you have a very stable flat sort of platform. So let's bring in another prop and talk about that for a few minutes. Let's see if this works. Let me zoom out a little bit. So here we go. Yep, because one of the reasons to use an L plate, again, this whole thing started because of the Pinkie Grip, but the problem with the Sony one is that we could not easily attach it to a tripod, right? So the natural solution is to use an Arca Plate. And of course this one has it, so let's show how that works. I'm using a a7riii tripod in this case, and you can see, you can of course do it in a normal way, but I kind of like to be able to slide it in, and you can see that it hits the lock. I can press it and it's now sort of locked down, right? So you can see quite easily, and if you turn it, you have to find a little bit how you do that yourself. I kind of like to slide them in or out and out, and once I know which position is safe on the let me show it later. Once I know which position is safe, I kind of don't want the screw to go any further, so that means that I can basically slide it in, right? Press the button, and now it's in a safe position, right? It can't, of course it's now locked, the locks work perfectly, and you can tighten it up a little bit further, and you're done. And again, let me rotate it. You can see that it works as advertised. Okay, let's also show it in the other position. 1, 2, safety, lock it out. Of course, then in this case, once this velcros here, it makes a little bit more sense, or it's even easier, maybe I should say it like this. And now you can see also why this is important, that this was not metal here, because then it might collide. But you can see that it's quite easy to slide it into this position, and there we go. So yeah, I think this is a kind of the first look at this product. Let me think about, oh yeah, the one I did not show. So let me take this out again. Oh, well, let me show two things more. Let me also quickly show, although I have not really tried it myself. You can see there's a screw at the bottom, which opens up the L plate part. Right, so I should be able to unlock it. You saw that it moved a little bit because I didn't tighten up the other screw enough. I didn't want to do that on video, so. But you can see you can slide this out and then put it in any position you want. So locked it up a bit. I don't want to, oops. And you can now see that it's arranged for tethering. So that means that if you lock it in now, right? It still feels very stable. But you can see there's room here so that the cables can still be attached and that you can tether. The second reason why we wanted this is that I think, and this is something that I will talk about in the next video because I haven't tested it yet, that this is also a good way to set up for video work, so that you have all your cables here and you can kind of hold it like this, right? Maybe even make a nice part for this, that you can make a grip for it, but you can already see, let me put this away a bit, you can already see that you have this safe space where you can open up the doors and you can attach, you can open up the doors and attach all the cables in between and then hold it like this. And actually it's already, even if I put my fingers like this, it already feels, the first time I'm doing this, it already feels quite comfortable. And I think with some work and maybe an extra part, it might in fact be very, very nice. That's also the reason why we make this part be able to be removed, so that we have more options in the future to play around with this setup. Right? So I think this is it. It's well, it's not even half an hour. So so let me say, if you have questions about this L bracket, feel free to ask me. I will make a second video going into some of the more video sort of setup features. So if you have more questions, I will answer them in that video, no problem, or online on Facebook or YouTube. But this is kind of the 2122 L bracket from smallrig. This is a pre-production unit. I'm pretty sure that the production units will be the same. They promised to start shipping on 15th of May, so that's in about 2 weeks. Yeah, order yours, I would say. I think the price at the moment is about $40. It was, just to give you an idea, the whole bracket, everything I've showed you with 2 of the Allen wrenches and these parts, they pre-ordered them at $29, which I think is crazy. But they're still now about $40, and I think the regular price will be $59 top of my head, and I think that's great value compared to some of the other brands. Yeah, I think it's of course there's more aluminium involved. As you can see, they also put quite a lot of quality time in designing and figuring out how to make it work. They came up with some of the same solutions that other brands came up with, but that's okay, right? I mean, if something works, it works. But they did check everything themselves, and they even invited photographers into their factory to figure out what was the best sort of solution to some of the problems, and to have people have a feel how it felt. So I think for the price, it's a very good value. SmallRig, if you're a photographer, SmallRig makes a lot of video parts. So I'm filming this on an a6500, which is also in a SmallRig setup. So they have a lot of experience building video parts to building rigs, and this is kind of their first, I would almost say, crossover product for people, more photographers, because one thing we talked about that we wanted to make sure that it looks like something that can stay on the camera forever, right? And I would argue with normal video tools, they are a little bit more, let's say, rough and built for a certain task, and you take them off once you have your video project is done, or you change them up quite a lot, and you can see already still hints there, right? So do you still put in places where it makes sense. We put in stuff that you can attach another camera, another microphone here. We made it that you can attach extra cold shoe over here, which I'll show in the next video, so that you don't have to use this cold shoe because you might want to use it as a because you might want to need a connection, or you might want to have a flash here. So we did put in some hints for, let's say, this crossover area, but it's not fully made for let's say their normal clientele, which is video based people. So yeah, this was the first look. A little bit of a long first look. Oh yeah, again you can see that there's now this peak design thing is sort of hiding in there, and you can take it out and you show it, because normally you would use a peak design thingy like this. Hopefully I won't drop the camera, because it's quite an expensive camera and lens, but you can see that normally it would sort of bangle on your peak design sort of strap, and you want to be able to hide it away, so you can put it in there and then it's gone. Perfect. Again, thank you to SmallRig and everybody over there for making it and sending me this pre-production unit. Yeah, I can honestly say that I would have felt a little bit bad if it would not feel correct, right? Because it's always tricky how something feels. But I'm happy to report that nobody has to be mad at me if you order this for $29.50. It might not be for everybody. Some people might be disappointed by some parts, but I think in general, I think for the money in both the pre-order and its regular price, I think they did a wonderful job, and I'm totally happy with the end result so far. So talk to you later and see you in the next video where I will answer your questions. Bye bye.